Good day, and welcome back to another World of Warcraft video. In this video, we are going to be taking a look at the priority, or getting an idea of the priority in which you should upgrade your items. We're a couple weeks into Season 2 of World of Warcraft, and it's important to understand which items are obviously best to upgrade first. But before we do that, just a couple additional bits of information I want to mention. So firstly, if you need to understand the gear system a bit better, I do have a video explaining how all of it works, and I'll leave that in the top right hand corner. Secondly, another important thing to understand is that gear you have upgraded before in that slot, for example, if you've upgraded a weapon before, like I have, the second time you upgrade a weapon from that slot will be cheaper up to a certain point. So this will help you save on resources. And then finally, of course, the final mention to say is that the resources you need will come from appropriate base content, and it's important to always look at your unit stat prioritization before you contemplate exactly what you're building into. So that kind of covers, I guess, everything you probably need to know. Yeah, let's just kind of roll with it. So now let's talk about the understanding of the different stats per items. Because again, it's super important to understand how items actually gain their stats. So firstly, it's important to note two things. One, main pieces of gear, as in items like, for example, head pieces, chest pieces, leggings, give more stat distribution than braces, waist, etc. Next, rings and trinkets give higher secondary stat distributions, being stats like versatility, crit, and haste, comparative to main pieces of gear. Secondary stats are always second, hence the term, to primary stats. So especially if you kind of want to cookie cutter this, look at prioritizing the main stat of your items first. Now, as an example here, we've taken a suffused vest, which you can upgrade, and we compared it to another item. But it's important to understand as well that there is more going on than just main stats. But let's just look at understanding where we get the majority of our stats from. So the suffused breeches here, you can see if we upgrade them to max, will give us 95 additional agility and quite a substantial amount of stamina. If we upgrade our weapon, we get less of all our primary stats. However, we get more weapon damage. Weapon damage is a different concept to primary stats. Weapon damage is, for most classes, tanks, DPS, and even in some cases healers, weapon damage is actually a very important stat in your baseline damage calculation, more so than any other. So upgrading your weapons is going to be the most direct route to a DPS increase. Upgrading your trinkets is going to be something that's better for secondary stats, but as I described, trinkets are a lot less, well, on the priority list, as secondary stats, although crucial to making sure your build is optimized, are less crucial than your main pieces, especially if you are ensuring that your main pieces, such as your head, chest, leggings, etc., all have the correct stat distributions. But as you can see, comparatively while running through these items, our chest, our legs, these will give us our biggest stat increases. So when we talk about prioritizing which items to improve, we need to look at these, and there's a reason why. Because the amount of dragon scales remains the same regardless of which piece. You will have noticed throughout this entire demonstration that for every single piece it requires the same amount of dragon scales to max them out, being 5. Obviously some of them are at different levels, but the point remains that you will use the same amount of Drake scales, for example, to level a bracer as you would a chest. So it's important to prioritize the chest, especially if it's giving you a much higher stat upgrade. So yes, overall, obviously there is a very big incentive here to raise the correct items. And I think the number one item players should consider raising is their weapon. For most players, especially those that play DPS, weapon is a priority build, even for tanks, even for some healers, and weapon is definitely something that's super crucial towards your class's performance. Next, you want to go into your chest piece, as this is your highest stat gain you will get on an item per item level gain. Next, you want to go into your leggings, and then finally your headpiece, which unfortunately I don't currently have. After that, you want to start looking at your legs, your hands and feet, as those are your next highest stat distributions. And then you want to look at braces and waist. These will cover your main stats, but it's important to check that these items you are building have the correct secondary stat distribution. Again, you don't want to be in a situation where you aren't really covering yourself from a stats distribution point. Cape is technically before trinkets. However, cape doesn't give a huge amount of stat variety. So I do understand if players would rather consider potentially doing something like prioritizing, for example, let's say trinkets, just depending on what your stat distribution is looking like at the time. And remember to also factor in your set. Right now, it's not very easy to build into a new set bonus. So before you upgrade an item, look if that is going to break up your set and consider whether to upgrade that item now or later. Generally, a sizable item level upgrade of about 20 item level is definitely well worth considering breaking up a set piece or looking at converting another one in the interim. But that's going to be it from me. Just a very brief video to kind of help people with better optimizing their item upgrades and just to have a bit of a better time overall when it comes to improving their performance. That's it from me. See you next time. Bye.